Fresh out of college with a business degree, I found myself right back where I never thought I'd be home. I'm Claire, 23 years old, and moving back in with my parents wasn't exactly part of the plan. But with student loans looming and rent prices skyrocketing, staying here for a few months seemed like the smart move. Just until I got on my feet. The job hunt didn't take long. Within a week, I landed a position at Lockwood and Company Marketing, and the salary was decent enough to start saving for my own place. That night, over my mom's signature spaghetti and meatballs, I shared my good news. I figured I'd stay for about 3 months, save up some money, and then get my own apartment, I said, twirling my fork through the pasta. The sound of silverware clinking against plates suddenly stopped. My parents exchanged a glance, one of those silent conversations that always meant trouble. Moving out? Mom repeated, setting her fork down. Honey, you know my hours at the library got cut, and your dad's job at the factory isn't as stable as it used to be. There have been whispers about layoffs. Dad cleared his throat. We could really use your help with the bills. And you wouldn't even have to pay rent, Mom added quickly. It just makes sense, doesn't it? I stared at my plate, my appetite fading. I had worked my ass off in college so I could be independent, not get guilt-tripped into staying home longer than planned. But they were my parents. I couldn't just say no, could I? So I stayed. Life fell into a rhythm work. Bills, dinner. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. At least, it was until my older brother Ethan showed up that weekend with his wife, Jessica, and their 2 kids, Ava and Noah. The moment they walked through the door, it was like a switch flipped in my parents. My angels! Mom squealed, scooping up 5-year-old Ava while Dad swung 3-year-old Noah onto his shoulders. Ethan, sweetheart! Jess, you look wonderful! Tell us everything! I stood in the doorway, watching my parents fawn over Ethan and his perfect little family. They bombarded him with questions about his job, their new house, and even the smallest details, like what Ava had learned in preschool that week. Meanwhile, I could have announced I was secretly a billionaire, and they probably wouldn't have even blinked. Claire, be a dear and put on some coffee, Mom called over her shoulder, already too busy bouncing. Noah on her knee to look my way. Standing in the kitchen, I let out a slow breath. It had always been this way. Ethan, 4 years my senior, had been the golden child since day one. I'd spent my whole life in his shadow, learning to exist as an afterthought. I remembered when I was 11, coming home with my straight A report card, excited to show Mom. She barely glanced at it before turning back to her conversation with Ethan about his soccer tournament. That's nice, honey, she had said absently. Ethan, which college scouts have reached out so far? High school had been more of the same. Every dinner conversation revolved around Ethan's grades, his sports, his college applications. Meanwhile, I just sat there, pushing peas around my plate, unnoticed. But nothing compared to when Ethan got into university. That night, Mom had cried tears of joy while Dad promised, "We'll make it work." Our boy deserves the best education. A week later, they sat me down with a much different talk. Claire, Dad said, his voice serious, we need to cut back on expenses. Between Ethan's tuition and the mortgage, things are going to be tight. That's when things really changed. While my classmates got new clothes from the mall, I got mine from thrift stores. Christmas gifts became practical socks, notebooks, maybe a single book if I was lucky. But they never forgot to send Ethan money. Your brother needs to focus on school, Mom would say, as she wrote yet another check. I learned early that if I wanted a different future, I had to fight for it myself. I studied until my eyes burned, applied for every scholarship I could find, and worked part-time at a coffee shop. By some miracle, I got a full ride to State University. The relief on my parents' faces when I told them they wouldn't have to pay a dime said it all. Meanwhile, Ethan graduated, got a cushy job in finance, married Jessica, and had 2 kids in quick succession. My parents were over the moon. Their golden child had built the perfect life. And yet, every monthly visit played out the same way. Ethan and Jessica would barely be through the door before she'd turn to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Claire, you don't mind watching the kids while we run errands, do you? Before I could answer, she'd add, Mike and I barely get any alone time these days. I glanced at Mom, hoping for backup. Instead, she rubbed her lower back with a sigh. You know it's hard for me to keep up with young children, Dad nodded, and I need my rest on weekends. So there I was, stuck watching Frozen for the 100th time, while Ava tried to braid my hair and Noah attempted to color on my laptop. Ethan and Jessica were off at brunch. Mom and Dad were tending to their garden, and I was once again playing the role of the reliable, invisible little sister. I consoled myself with the thought that it was just one weekend a month. Just one weekend where I had to pause my life, so Ethan and Jessica could enjoy theirs. Then a year passed, and another, and I was still here, babysitting on demand, paying most of the household bills, and watching my savings account barely grow. I was getting used to it, almost. Then, one night, I heard Mom's phone ring. I wasn't paying much attention until I heard her say, "Oh, sweetheart, don't cry. Tell me what happened." I set my glass down, my stomach tightening. Through the phone, Ethan's voice was loud enough for me to catch his words clearly. Jessica and I were struggling. "I lost my job. We can't afford rent anymore. Can we stay with you for a while?" "Of course you can," Mom said instantly. "We'll make room." My heart dropped. I cleared my throat. Maybe this would be a good time for me to get my own place. "You'd think I suggested burning the house down. Claire, don't be ridiculous," Mom said, giving me a look like I had lost my mind. "We have plenty of room, but we're family," Dad added firmly. "We stick together in hard times." I looked at their expectant faces, then at my half-empty savings account on my phone, and I realized for the first time that my life was not my own. Not yet. If I thought things were bad before, I had no idea what was coming. At first, having Ethan and his family in the house was chaotic but tolerable. Boxes filled every corner. The living room became a second playroom, and my old bedroom, once my only escape, was transformed into a nursery for Ava and Noah. My new room was the old storage closet, just big enough for a twin bed and a nightstand. But the space wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how quickly I became everyone's go-to babysitter. I'd come home from work, exhausted from back-to-back meetings, only to find Jessica already dressed to go out. "Oh, good. You're home," she'd say, slipping on her heels. "Ethan and I are meeting some friends for dinner. The kids already ate, so you just need to get them in bed." "Thanks, Claire." And just like that, she'd disappear. At first, I tried to set boundaries. "I have plans tonight," I said one Friday when she tried the same routine. Jessica blinked, as if the concept was completely foreign to her. "Can't you reschedule? We already made reservations." When I didn't answer right away, she sighed dramatically. "Come on, Claire, it's just one night. You're really going to leave your niece and nephew without anyone to tuck them in?" And of course, Mom chimed in. "Honey, you're being difficult. Your brother and Jessica need time to recharge. They're under a lot of stress." Stress? Them? I was working full-time, paying for most of the bills, crammed into a glorified broom closet, and somehow I was the selfish one. But no matter how much I protested, I always caved. Because saying no meant endless guilt-tripping, cold shoulders, and comments about how family helps family. I was drowning. Then, one evening, I came home to find the entire kitchen wrecked. Dishes piled in the sink, sauce splattered on the stove. A half-eaten peanut butter sandwich stuck to the counter like cement. Noah and Ava were running around screaming, one of them wielding a marker like a weapon. I looked to Mom, expecting her to do something. Instead, she gave me a tired smile and said, "Could you clean up a bit, sweetheart?" I had a long day, and just like that, something inside me snapped. "No," I said, louder than I intended. The room went silent. Mom blinked. "What?" "No," I repeated, setting my bag down. "I'm done. I am not your housekeeper, your free babysitter, or the person who picks up everyone's mess. I work all day, I pay your bills, and I'm treated like an afterthought in my own home." I turned to Ethan and Jessica, who were standing in the doorway. "If you two want nights out, hire a babysitter. If you want a free place to stay, pay rent. But I am done putting my life on hold for people who don't even say thank you." Jessica let out a disbelieving laugh. "Are you serious right now?" "Completely." Ethan crossed his arms. "Claire, come on. You know we're going through a hard time." "So am I shot back. "But the difference is, no one's bending over backwards to make my life easier." Mom shook her head. Sweetheart, you're overreacting. Am I? I gestured around the house. Because from where I'm standing, I'm the only one being used here. Mom's face twisted into that disappointed look she'd perfected over the years. I can't believe how ungrateful you're being. After everything we've done for you, I laughed bitterly. Everything you've done for me? Are you serious? The only thing you've ever done is make it clear that Ethan comes first. Always has. Always will. Silence. No one could argue with that. I exhaled slowly, my heart pounding. I'm moving out, Mom gasped. Ethan and Jessica exchanged looks. Where will you even go? Dad finally spoke, as if the idea had never crossed his mind. I'll figure it out, I said, already pulling out my phone. But I'd rather sleep in my car than keep living like this. Mom's voice softened. Honey, don't be rash. You know we love you. I met her gaze. If you really loved me, you'd respect me. But you don't, you just expect things from me. And with that, I turned and walked to my room. I had a plan to make. I didn't sleep that night. Lying in my tiny bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had said it. I was moving out. The words were still ringing in my ears. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to relief. But I also felt fear. Where was I going to go? I had barely any savings because my paycheck had been swallowed by household bills. My friends all had roommates or lived too far from my job. An apartment hunting in the city without a solid financial cushion? A nightmare. Still, one thing was clear. Staying here wasn't an option anymore. The next morning, I woke up determined. Before even brushing my teeth, I was online looking at apartments. The prices made me want to scream. Studios were listed at prices that only made sense if they came with a personal chef and oceanfront views. Morning, Mom said as I stepped into the kitchen. She was acting like nothing had happened, as if last night's argument had been wiped clean. That was her way pretend things were fine until I dropped the issue. Not this time. I poured myself some coffee. I meant what I said. I'm leaving. She sighed, setting down her mug. Claire, don't be dramatic. I'm not. I leaned against the counter. I should have done this years ago. Her lips pressed together. And where, exactly, do you plan to go? I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. I'll figure it out. Her expression darkened. You're making a mistake. No, staying had been the mistake. Before she could try to guilt-trip me further, my phone rang. It was Rachel, one of my coworkers. Hey, she said when I picked up. I was thinking about what you said yesterday, and I might have a solution. I stepped outside, away from my mother's prying ears. I'm listening. You remember my cousin Hannah? The one who got that job in Seattle? I did. Rachel had mentioned her once or twice. Well, she was renting a one-bedroom near downtown, and she moved out last week. Her lease runs for another 3 months, and the landlord is looking for someone to take over. Hope flickered in my chest. How much is the rent? Rachel hesitated. It's not cheap, but it's cheaper than most places around here, and it's fully furnished. That was all I needed to hear. I'll take it. Are you sure? I know things are tight for you. I exhaled, glancing back at the house. I'll make it work. The next 2 days were a blur. I signed the lease transfer, emptied my bank account for the deposit, and started packing. The whole time, my family acted like I was going through a phase I'd snap out of. You're really doing this? Ethan asked on my last night there, standing in my doorway with his arms crossed. Yep. I shoved a sweater into my duffel bag. He scoffed. You're overreacting. I stopped packing and looked at him. Overreacting? You have no idea how lucky you are, Claire, he continued, shaking his head. Mom and Dad let you live here for free, and you're acting like a spoiled brat. My fingers tightened around the fabric in my hands. Free? I repeated. Ethan, I've been paying the bills for this entire house while you and your family lived here rent-free. The only difference is, I don't get the special treatment you do. His jaw clenched. That's not fair, isn't it? I cut him off. You had your entire college paid for. I had to grind for a full scholarship because I knew there wouldn't be anything left for me. And when you lost your job, did Mom and Dad tell you to tighten your belt like they told me? No. They rearranged their whole lives to make room for you. His silence told me everything. I zipped my bag and slung it over my shoulder. I hope things work out for you, Ethan. But I'm done being second place in my own life. I pushed past him and walked downstairs. My parents were sitting in the living room, pretending to watch TV, but clearly waiting for me to say something. I didn't. I grabbed my keys, opened the front door, and stepped outside. Then I was free. Moving into Hannah's old place was the best decision I had ever made. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells. No guilt tripping, no sudden babysitting shifts, no dinners where I sat in silence while my parents hung on to Ethan's every word. It wasn't easy, though. My savings were gone and the rent was steep. I picked up extra shifts at work, started budgeting like a maniac, and cut every unnecessary expense. No more takeout. No more spontaneous shopping. Every dollar counted. But despite the struggle, I felt alive. Every morning, I woke up in a space that was mine. I made coffee and actually drank it hot. I read books without constant interruptions. I worked late without dreading the chaos I'd come home to. It was peaceful. And then, about a month later, the text started, "Mom, Claire, we need to talk. Call me when you can. Ethan, you need to apologize to Mom and Dad. You really hurt them. Jessica, the kids miss you. They don't understand why you abandoned them. I ignored them all." Then the messages turned into guilt trips. "Mom, the bills are really high this month without your help. We're struggling, Claire. Please don't do this to us. Ethan, do you even care about family? After everything Mom and Dad did for you? Jessica, Ava keeps asking where Aunt Claire is. Do you really want to break a little girl's heart?" I stared at my phone, torn between frustration and exhaustion. They didn't care about me. They cared about what I could do for them. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they wanted. I blocked them. I didn't just mute the notifications. I blocked them. My parents, my brother, even Jessica. It felt extreme, but I knew what would happen if I didn't. They'd wear me down, pull me back into their orbit, and I'd be trapped all over again. I had to choose myself this time, and I did. The first night after blocking them, I expected to feel guilty. Instead, I slept better than I had in years. For the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's expectations, and it felt incredible. The silence was bliss. For the first time in my life, my phone wasn't a constant source of stress. No guilt-tripping texts, no passive-aggressive voicemails, just peace. I kept waiting for the guilt to creep in, for the familiar urge to fix everything, to be the good daughter again, but it never came. Instead, every day that passed without them felt lighter, like I was slowly untangling myself from years of obligation. Then, one Friday evening, I got home from work to find someone waiting outside my building. Mom. She was leaning against the front steps, arms crossed, her expression tight. My stomach sank. I should have known she'd pull something like this. I sighed and walked past her toward the door, fishing for my keys. "How did you even find my place? You didn't leave us much choice, Claire." Her tone was clipped. "You've been ignoring us for weeks because I needed space." I turned to face her, keeping my voice steady. "And because every time I tried to talk to you, all you did was guilt-trip me." Mom exhaled sharply, like she was trying to hold on to whatever patience she had left. "I didn't come here to fight." "Then why are you here?" She hesitated. "The bills have been really high without your help." "Of course." I let out a humorless laugh. "So, that's what this is about. You're not here because you miss me. You're here because you want money." "That's not fair," she snapped. "We're struggling, Claire. Your father's hours got cut again, and with Ethan and the kids, I held up a hand." "Stop," she blinked. "I am not your backup plan," I said firmly. "I gave you everything I had. My time, my money, my freedom. And the second I set a boundary, you ignored it. You're doing it right now." Her jaw tightened. "So what? You're just going to pretend we don't exist?" "No," I said, "but I'm not going to sacrifice myself for you anymore." A long, tense silence stretched between us. Finally, Mom let out a bitter chuckle. "You've changed." I met her gaze. "Yeah, I have." She shook her head and turned to leave, but before she walked away, she threw one last dagger. "Don't expect us to be there when you come crawling back. I didn't flinch. I won't be." And with that, she was gone. I should have been shaken after that. A few months ago, I would have been. But instead of feeling guilty, I felt relieved. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't let her manipulate me. And I knew I never would again. The weeks that followed were some of the best I'd ever had. Work was going well, my apartment finally felt like home, and for the first time in years, I was living for me, not my family. Then one morning, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown, hey, it's Ethan. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Me, about what? Ethan, I think we need to clear the air. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But another part, the part that still remembered when we were just kids, before everything got complicated, wanted to hear what he had to say. So I agreed to meet. We met at a small coffee shop near my office. Ethan looked different, tired, stressed. He cleared his throat. So, you look good. I raised an eyebrow. Did you come here to make small talk? He sighed. No. Look, I know things got messy, and I know we haven't exactly been fair to you. I crossed my arms. You think? Ethan winced. Okay. We weren't fair to you. He ran a hand through his hair. I guess I just wanted to say, I get it now. That caught me off guard. What? His shoulders slumped. Things at home have been bad since you left. The bills, the stress, it's been a lot. And I see now how much we dumped on you, how much we expected from you without ever thinking about what you wanted. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. He sighed. Jessica and I finally moved out last week. We found a small apartment. It's not much, but it's ours. I didn't know what to say. He hesitated. I don't want us to be strangers, Claire. I know I messed up, and I know I can't undo the past, but I do miss you. A lump formed in my throat. Because despite everything, despite the resentment and hurt, he was still my brother. And a small part of me had been waiting to hear those words for years. I don't know if we can go back to how things were, I admitted. But maybe we can figure out something better. Ethan nodded. I'd like that. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. That night, I sat in my apartment, thinking about everything that had happened over the past few months. I had lost my family, but I had also found myself. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally exactly where I was supposed to be. For the first time in a long time, my life was mine. No unexpected bills draining my paycheck. No forced babysitting shifts. No walking on eggshells, waiting for the next guilt trip. I woke up every morning knowing I could make my own choices, and that feeling? Indescribable. But freedom didn't mean everything was suddenly perfect. After my conversation with Ethan, things between us were tentative. We weren't as close as we had been when we were kids, but we weren't strangers either. Every once in a while, I'd get a text from him, updates about his new apartment, funny things the kids said, the occasional, hope you're doing well, and surprisingly, I didn't hate it. I wasn't sure what our relationship would look like in the future, but for the first time, it felt like there was a possibility for something real, something that wasn't built on expectation or obligation. My parents, on the other hand, that was a different story. After Mom's little ambush outside my apartment, I stuck to my decision. No contact. No falling back into old patterns. No more sacrificing myself for people who had only ever seen me as a resource. And it was working. Until one afternoon, when my phone rang, the number wasn't saved, but I recognized it instantly. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. Then another. Finally, a text. Mom, Claire, it's an emergency. Please call me. I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to engage. But what if something was actually wrong? With a deep breath, I hit call. Mom answered immediately. Claire. Thank God. What's going on? A dramatic sigh. It's your father. He had a health scare. We had to take him to the hospital. My stomach dropped. What happened? They think it might have been a mild heart attack, she said, her voice trembling. He's stable now, but they're keeping him for tests. I gripped the edge of my desk, trying to steady myself. Is he okay? He's weak, she sniffled. The doctors are saying we need to reduce his stress. He can't work as much anymore. And with the bills, there it was, the real reason she called. My jaw tightened. You want money. Mom let out a small, wounded gasp. Claire, how can you say that? Your father is in the hospital and you think this is about money. I closed my eyes. Isn't it? Silence. Then, in a much smaller voice, she said, We just need a little help, sweetheart. Just until we get back on our feet. I let out a slow breath. Old me? She would have caved. She would have wired the money, told herself it's just this once, and gotten sucked right back in. But I wasn't that person anymore. "I'm sorry Dad's sick," I said, my voice steady. "But I can't help you." Mom's tone turned sharp. "So, that's it? You're really just going to turn your back on us?" "No," I swallowed. "I'm just not going to set myself on fire to keep you warm anymore." Another silence, heavier this time. "I hope Dad recovers," I said, honestly. "But I have to go now." Before she could say anything else, I ended the call. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. Dad made a full recovery. Ethan kept me updated, though he never pushed me to reach out. A few weeks after Dad got home, I got a short, simple text from him. "Dad, I'm okay." That was it. No guilt, no expectations, just a few words. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I'm glad. And that was enough. Months passed, and life moved forward. I got a promotion at work. My savings account started growing for the first time in years. I even started dating again, something I hadn't had the energy for when I was constantly drowning in family drama. Most importantly, I was happy. Not the kind of forced, "I'm fine" happy I used to fake, but genuinely, quietly happy. The kind that comes from knowing you're in control of your own life. And one evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I realized something. I didn't regret anything, not cutting them off, not standing my ground, not walking away. Because for the first time in forever, I wasn't living for anyone else. I was living for me. And that was everything. Story 2. My parents were what you could consider a typical family when I was born, followed by my younger sister, Sarah. Our modest 2-story home was located in a peaceful neighborhood. Really nothing noteworthy. But now that I think about it, I see that's when my feeling of normalcy stopped. 3 years after my birth, from the time Sarah was born, the dynamics of our family changed. She was a fragile infant who was always getting sick. Bronchitis developed from colds. Chronic ear infections developed, and enigmatic fevers would suddenly strike. Standing on my tiptoes by her cot, I recalled witnessing her parents hover over her with anxious expressions as they took her temperature for the 100th time that day. Ironically, I was never able to catch anything. Sarah, on the other hand, appeared to draw every disease that was in vogue. I continued to be stubbornly healthy. There was not even a cough, sniffle, or skinny that required more than a Band-Aid. You would assume that having a child this healthy would make parents quite happy. However, my excellent health became nearly inconvenient due to our health. When I initially wished I would get sick, I was 7 years old. One night, while laying in bed, I prayed for a fever or a severe cough. Anything that would get my dad to tell me stories the way they did for Sarah and my mom to massage my hair. I even once pretended to have a stomach ailment, but my mother just responded, "You're fine, Gloria," after taking one glance at me. "Go wash the dishes for me now." The tendency only got stronger as we entered our adolescent years. When I was 14, I essentially took over the care of our home, while Sarah, who was 11, spent much of her time sleeping on the sofa or in her bed. Regular cleaning was the beginning, but as time went on, Mom's worries about germs became a complete fixation. It was necessary to sanitize every surface many times each day. At least 3 mop cycles, if not more, were required for the floors. If a person had entered wearing shoes, please don't let a dust particle land anywhere close to Sarah, who is so lovely. However, I just spent an hour cleaning everything, Mom. Staring at the previously immaculate floor, I object. "Gloria, don't fight with me." With a snap, she would shove the mop into my grasp. "Do you wish for your sister to become ill? Would you like her to return to the hospital?" That turned become her weapon of choice. Shame. Any opposition on my behalf was portrayed as an outright assault on Sarah's well-being. Sarah, meantime, would read magazines or watch TV, occasionally giving me a pitying glance, but never attempting to assist. Why would she? After all, she was the one who was ill. The cleaning schedule started to take on a ritualistic quality. Sweep in the morning, dust and mop. In the afternoon, do it again. Good evening, do it once more. Mom would examine everything with the rigor of a military sergeant, pointing out dust particles that were undetectable and insisting that whole rooms be redone. I stopped noticing the bleach and disinfectant scent since it was so persistent. As soon as I stopped feeling the pain from all the washing in my arms. Between school, housekeeping, and attempting to have a somewhat regular teenage life, the continual cleaning and caregiving was wearing me out. I thought I was going to drown. I noticed the help wanted sign in the window of Miller's Diner, which is just 3 streets away from our home. At that point, I'd want to work there. At supper that evening, when I was observing my mother chopping Sarah's meat into little pieces, I said that she was more than capable of doing it herself. I'm 16 now, a restaurant. Mom wrinkled her nose. Gloria, how many germs are there? Dad spoke out, which surprised me. Helen let her try. She could benefit from having some accountability. That almost made me chuckle, as like I hadn't been taking on responsibility since I was 7 years old. However, I said nothing. I didn't want to risk this unanticipated help. The diner became my haven. Yes, that was a difficult task, clearing tables, carrying plates, and interacting with irate patrons. However, it was not like the constant cleaning at home. I was appreciated. In fact, the owner, Miss S. Miller, commended me for my efforts. Clients grinned sincere as they left tips. Every day for 4 hours. I was more than simply the healthy one, Sarah, or my sister. I was merely Gloria, the dependable waitress who could recall what they had ordered for coffee. I immediately deposited every dime I made into my hidden savings account. I would shrug and pretend I was purchasing new clothes or school supplies when my mother inquired about my paychecks. As long as they didn't have to pay for me, she never asked any questions. Although they were content, the dinner was only a component of my escape strategy. I devoted myself to my studies throughout the day with the same zeal I used to tidy our home. I signed up for every advanced placement course our school offered, participated in every competition, and joined every academic group I could. My chemistry instructor, Gloria Martinez, declared that she had achieved a flawless score on the state science Olympiad one day. My classmates applauded once more, but I was already considering how this would appear on my college applications. A full riding scholarship was what I needed. It would determine my future. I wasn't even shocked when I received my admission letter from State University, which included a full academic scholarship. Knowing what was going to happen, I waited to tell my parents even though I had worked too hard for any other result. As expected, I was seated at the kitchen table by my parents a week later. Sarah stood at the doorway and pretended not to hear. Gloria, with a voice laden with seasoned martyrdom, Mom started. With all of Sarah's medical expenditures, we need to discuss college. We just aren't able to cover your tuition. Dad seemed very uncomfortable at the end. Everything has been removed by the treatments. I pulled out my acceptance letter and interrupted. I got a full scholarship. Everything is taken care of. Books, room, and board, and tuition. There won't be any fees for you. It should have hurt to see the relief on their faces. However, I had moved on from that. The look of jealousy that appeared on Sarah's face as she sculpted away from the doorway caught me off guard. To be honest, the 800 miles between home and State University wasn't far enough. Despite its small size, mint green walls, and a squeaky bed, my dorm room was mine. No guilt trips, no cleaning schedules, not being reminded of Sarah's needs all the time. I immediately declared business management as my major. I reasoned that I could handle any challenge the business world presented if I could manage entitled patrons and daily totals at a diner. When we can, we'll try to send you some cash. On our weekly phone call, Mom had said. However, Sarah's new treatment is fine despite being very costly. Already familiar with the script, I interrupted her. I got a job at the cafe on campus. The job at the cafe wasn't bad. I served expensive lattes to professors and students who were sleep-deprived while working in between classes and on some weekends. The flexible schedule made up for the tips, which weren't as good as the diner. I also saved a ton of caffeine because they gave us free access to the mess-up drinks. I occasionally called my parents. There was a pattern to all the conversations. Mom would enumerate Sarah's most recent medical problems. Every time Dad muttered something about bills, they would both find a way to bring up the high cost of everything. I get better at responding succinctly and swiftly shifting the topic. I only spent significant holidays at home. Usually, Sarah would be there, playing the part of the fragile flower while appearing less ill each time. Then came the news that Sarah had graduated high school. I wasn't able to attend the ceremony. Or at least that's what I told them. Finals were a convenient excuse. We're so proud, Mom gushed during our next call. She's going to attend Madison College. Their medical program is excellent and they have a wonderful student health center. I gripped my phone tighter. That's great. How's she paying for it? There was a slight pause. Oh, we've been saving. The irony hit me like a slap after years of, we spend everything on Sarah's treatments and we just can't afford college right now. They'd somehow managed to find enough money to send her to a private college. I thought about my own scholarship applications, the countless nights spent perfecting essays while also maintaining my grades and working at the diner. That's excellent, I added, keeping my voice neutral. I'm pleased for her. We only want what's best for her well-being, Mom said, as if I may have forgotten their everlasting justification. After hanging up, I rested on my bed and let out a big sigh. The usual bitter sensation in my lips wasn't precisely rage anymore. It was more like validation. Every scholarship I'd gotten, every extra shift I'd worked, every cent I'd saved had been the perfect one. After graduation, I secured an entry-level employment with Bennett and Associates, a mid-sized consulting business. The initial compensation wasn't remarkable, but I saw potential. While other new recruits grumbled about lengthy hours and hard jobs, I poured myself into every project. Martinez, my boss, shouted out one Friday afternoon, "That efficiency protocol you proposed for the Thompson account? The CEO loved it. Keep this up and you're going someplace." I did continue. Every project, presentation, and customer encounter turned into a chance for me to demonstrate my abilities. I gained a reputation for being meticulous and coming up with creative solutions. The senior partners took note when I suggested a new CRM system that resulted in thousands of dollars in savings for the business. From then on, the promotions came steadily, from a junior analyst to a senior analyst, project manager to senior analyst. Every promotion came with greater accountability, respect, and, of course, financial gain. I purchased some appropriate furnishings and relocated from my small studio to a respectable one-bedroom flat. Began to accumulate an emergency savings with nothing to spend it on, leaving my family behind. Your quarterly results are outstanding. I learned this directly from Mr. Bennett at my third-year review. Would you be interested in leading our brand new section dedicated to digital transformation? I felt like I had finally established a stable career for myself at the age of 30, earning 6 figures. When the phone rang, "Gloria, sweetheart," Mom's voice had that artificial joy I so vividly recalled. "You have to come this weekend. This is significant family news. Sarah will be devastated if you're not present." There are certain things that never change. I changed my plans, gave my team some assignments, and purchased a ticket home. When I got there, the home was exactly the same. Nothing has changed, maybe a few extra cleaning items at the entrance. In the driveway were an unknown blue sedan and Sarah's vehicle. I knocked, but Mom opened the door first. Come in, Gloria." The living room is where everyone is. A tall man with spectacles and a worried smile sat next to Sarah on the couch. Mom immediately took her place, and Dad sat down in his favorite armchair, next to Sarah. "Gloria?" Sarah smiled. "This is my fiancé, David. We're getting married." Sarah went on, revealing a large diamond ring in her left hand. 2 weeks from now comes the engagement party. "You'll arrive, correct?" I was able to make the proper celebratory noises and grin. Despite his pleasant appearance, David appeared strange. The topic of my career kept coming up during the dinner. Father, mother. Sarah was unable to stop asking questions. "Now, what is your actual title?" Mom pushed and insisted. How many individuals did Dad wish to know? Digital change. "That's impressive," Sarah thought. "Must be properly compensated." I gave evasive answers to every inquiry. Years of experience assisting me in avoiding their more acerbic questions on my financial situation. However, I couldn't get rid of the impression that this unexpected interest in my professional accomplishment went beyond light talk. The 2 weeks passed quickly due to project meetings and work commitments. Before I knew it, I had returned to my hometown and was rolling up to the Grand Plaza, which is perhaps the priciest eatery in the city. Wearing a fashionable outfit that I knew she couldn't buy on her entry-level nursing wage, Sarah waved me from the door. Standing next to her, David was uneasy in his new outfit. There were so many people I hardly recognized in the private dining area: friends, old family, and distant relatives. What appeared to be the whole extended family of David. Glasses of crystal clinked, with champagne bottles and ornate floral arrangements in the center of each table. Waiters moved fluidly between them. As the evening went on, the pricey courses included vintage wines, Wagyu steak, and imported caviar. I was forced to perform the mental maths. On my most recent visit, this must have been in the thousands. I knew David worked at a local library, and Sarah had stated that she was having trouble paying her student loans. The figures did not add up. For table 3, another bottle of champagne. Without even looking at the wine list, Sarah shouted to a server who was walking by. She grinned when I looked at her. We must appropriately rejoice, don't we? The restaurant manager finally came to our table as the dessert plates were being cleaned and patrons were beginning to gather their belongings. He had a leather folder with him. Before anybody else could move, he looked hopefully at the gathering and announced the evening's final bill. Sarah waved vaguely. "Oh, it will be handled by my sister Gloria." She gave me an artificially pleasant grin. You know, she's a huge executive in the city and quite successful. The manager extended the folder and turned to face me. My blood ran cold as I took it and opened it. There were a lot more zeros in the bottom figure than I had anticipated, even using my worst-case estimates. Every eye at the table was on me when I looked up. Their faces of calculated nonchalance were exactly the same, as though this had always been the plan. Despite his horrified expression, David remained silent. Sarah, too. Sarah was grinning, smiling, as if she had just performed a clever maneuver. This was planned. Everything. They would have assumed I wouldn't dare raise a disturbance at my sister's engagement party based on the extravagant menu options, the expensive wines, the interminable appetizers, and the incessant queries about my profession and pay during their surprise announcement. With my chair scuffing the wooden floor, I carefully got up and closed the bill folder. The restaurant has become more subdued. The tension at our table was sensed by other visitors. With a calm voice, I declared, "I'm not paying this bill. I've never heard of any of this before." Sarah's expression twisted. "What are you saying? Don't you pay?" "You are, of course, paying." "Gloria, you're my sister." Mom gave a hiss, a void creating a commotion. David's parents looked at each other in worry. His mom bent over. "I apologize. What's going on?" We believed that the bill had been prepared. Nothing was planned. Gazing straight at Sarah, one said, "They didn't question me, they just assumed I paid." Red in the face, Sarah leaped from her seat. "You self-centered jerk! Even if you earn a lot of money, you are unable to assist your own sister." "What sort of individual are you, Sarah? Calm down, honey." David reached for her arm in an attempt to step in. She pulled clear of him. "Please don't tell me to relax. Everything is being ruined by her. I've always made her jealous." The scenario rapidly deteriorated. First a dish, then a wine glass, which Sarah snatched and threw against the wall. Then a second crystal broke. David's parents sprang up in horror as the guests gasped. When David attempted to reassure her once again, she gave him such a violent shove that he staggered back into a waiter. I left to observe the others. After taking my bag, I left the restaurant and headed directly to the airport. Sitting in the terminal, I made the reservation for the first flight home. My hands are trembling. An odd sensation of relief, rather than wrath or dread. At last, the mask had fallen. They were no longer able to feign. At 7 in the morning, my phone began to ring. The following morning, Mom's phone number? You dare? Before I could even greet her, she screamed, "Everything is damaged by you." Sarah is inconsolable. The engagement is most likely over now, and you are solely to blame. Was it my fault? I gave a hard chuckle. You attempted to con me. Con you? We are related. Your earnings are more than sufficient to support your sister on her special day. As usual, you're simply being self-centered. Dad's voice interrupted. I was on speaker. You made us seem bad in front of everyone. You must put this right. Put things correctly. I said it again. Do you mean to settle the bill? You attempted to deceive me into hiding. Yeah, Mom answered as though everything were clear. Additionally, you should pay for the wedding until Sarah's desired location is 40. Oh, since you've created all of this hardship, Additionally, it would be a nice method to express regret. I was unable to resist. I burst out laughing deep, almost hysterical laughter, not courteous laughter. When I can speak again, let me be very clear, I said. The engagement meal is not being covered by me. The wedding is not being paid for by me. Nothing is being paid for by me. Don't call me again, please. I went to make coffee after hanging up and blocking their numbers. I wasn't going to let their drama ruin my life any longer, and I had a meeting in 2 hours. I spotted it during my lunch break, a week after the restaurant incident, while browsing Facebook. The status of David's relationship has shifted to single. After a few clicks, it became clear that Sarah had deleted every single one of their pictures. The engagement didn't work out. It didn't surprise me. Any rational individual would flee after seeing Sarah's breakdown. The post that my mother wrote, and that seemed to be shared by all of our relatives with sorrowful hearts, was what caught me off guard later that night. We have to let you know that Sarah's engagement is over. Even though we often keep family affairs private, we feel compelled to talk about the heartbreaking acts that were intentional and cruel. Knowing how much this meant to her sister, our oldest daughter Gloria had pledged to assist with the engagement, celebration, and wedding expenses. But by refusing to pay the sum she had committed to pay for the engagement dinner, she deliberately embarrassed Sarah in front of both families. Long-standing jealousy and hatred were the source of this deliberate act of sabotage. We always knew that Gloria's health problems required the care Sarah required, but we never thought she would go to such far as to purposefully destroy her sister's happiness. David's family was so horrified by the sight that they urged him to reevaluate the marriage, and Sarah is distraught. One person's decision to choose conflict over sisterly love has ripped our family apart. For anyone who are curious as to why we are making this public, we think it's critical to confront toxic behavior, especially when it comes from family members. Like poison, the remarks flooded in. Gloria's icy and aloof demeanor during family get-togethers always gave me the creeps. Sarah, poor thing. In addition to her health problems, she has already experienced a great deal of betrayal from her own sister. How could somebody have such a cold heart? Family members ought to help one another. Margaret, who hadn't communicated with me for years, also added her voice. I'm very sad your kid ended up this way, Helen. Both daughters have amazing parents in you and Richard. Selfishness comes naturally to certain people. Rachel, a cousin who had gone to the engagement. While Sarah was weeping, Gloria just left while I was present. She made no effort to apologize or offer an explanation. Horrible conduct. More ferociously righteous than the previous, even distant cousins I hardly recognized were adding their names to the pile on each comment. Nobody challenged my parents' account of what happened. Nobody questioned why I may have declined payment. Nobody made an effort to listen to me. The story was established. Out of envy, I was the bad one who ruined my sister's happiness. The elder sister, who was prosperous but resentful, couldn't bear to watch her younger brother happy. The heartless professional lady who put her work above her family. I started typing. I've never been one to openly discuss family turmoil, but now that my parents have decided to provide their version of events, I feel obliged to tell the truth. I never committed to covering the cost of Sarah's wedding or engagement dinner. Actually, until the restaurant bill was given to me at the conclusion of the night, I was unaware of the purported responsibilities. The reality is straightforward. Without any previous discussion or consent, my parents and sister planned a lavish dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in town, invited 50 people, got premium everything, and then expected me to pay the enormous cost. Sarah threw and broke restaurant property during her outburst when I refused to cover the unexpected cost. In order to prevent things from getting worse, I fled. My folks contacted me the next morning to chastise me. They insisted that I pay for a $40,000 wedding in addition to the engagement dinner. This ambush was always planned by them. They really justified it by claiming that they earn enough money to pay for these costs. Don't believe anything I say. Listen for yourself. I've included the audio file. Out of instinct, I had taped the phone call that morning. Thank heavens. Their voices were loud and accusatory. You earn enough money, Mom, to make sure your sister has a wonderful day. Dad, you must put this right. Me? Do you mean to settle the bill? You attempted to deceive me into hiding Mom. Yes, indeed. You should also cover the cost of the wedding because you're the one who started all of this turmoil. Sarah wants a 40,000-seat facility. Though they were different, the remarks began right away. God, I'm so sorry for thinking the worst, Gloria. It's unbelievable that they attempted to surprise you with such a large cost. Who does that? Richard and Helen. You ought to feel embarrassed with yourselves. This is not parenting, it's exploitation. Margaret, too. I owe you the greatest apologies, Gloria, my dear. There was more to this story than I realized. I attended that meal, Cousin Rachel, and I could sense that something wasn't quite right. I ought to have raised my voice sooner. Gloria, I'm very sorry. Even some of David's relatives made comments, expressing their worries about Sarah's stability and behavior and claiming that her actions were more to blame for the engagement's breakdown than anything I had done. By arguing that the video was taken out of context, my parents attempted to repair the damage, but it was too late. The facts were out. I left before witnessing the repercussions. I removed the Facebook app from my phone, banned my parents' phones, and blocked Sarah and them on all social media. It was enough. 6 months have passed since then. Since then, I have not communicated with any of them. Relatives occasionally send me texts with news. Sarah is visiting a counselor. Right now, I don't reply, but my parents are in family counseling. I'm not holding my breath, but perhaps one day they'll realize the harm they've caused. I'm concentrating on my life, my work, and my family right now. I've selected pals that encourage me without attempting to take advantage of me. I also don't feel bad about prioritizing myself for the first time in my life. Leaving family, especially family, is sometimes the healthiest course of action. Story 3, growing up in Millbrook, a little town. Although our 2-story home wasn't very attractive, it was our home. Even though my sister Jane and I weren't living in luxury, my parents, who were both teachers at the neighborhood school, made sure we never went without. They always managed to make things work by extending a teacher's income in some way. Jane was everything I wasn't, including my closest friend and big sister. However, I liked the peaceful companionship of sketchbooks and books. Every room she entered was illuminated by her like a firework. As children, I clearly remember us climbing the ancient oak tree in our garden and making up fantastical tales about being princesses or explorers. Before our paths began to diverge, things were easier. The disparities between us became increasingly noticeable as we aged. Jane was everything. I wasn't gregarious, gifted, and obviously flawless. She started every school play, wrote poetry that moved our English teacher to tears, and still managed to be a standout basketball player. I was merely there in the interim. The quiet one, the one who prefers to read a book at lunch in the library rather than in the crowded restaurant. At the very least, our parents never publicly showed preference. They were as excited about Jane's triumphs as they were about my quiet successes and respectable grades. However, there was always this implicit knowledge that Jane was meant for more. It came as no surprise when Jane received admission letters to Riverside University, one of the state's most prominent universities. I can still clearly recall the day she received her letter. Mom and Dad were so happy that they couldn't stop sobbing. Riverside is where our baby is headed. Mom yelled and gave Jane a firm embrace. We knew you were unique from the beginning. Dad was already phoning family members. Have you heard that Jane entered Riverside? Complete academic support. The true rift between us started at that point. Life has a way of drawing individuals in separate directions, but it's not like we stopped loving one another. I remained in our childhood home, still trying to find out who I was meant to be, while Jane relocated to the city. I had no idea at the time that our sisterly closeness would be put to the test in unexpected ways. That one golden ring would destroy all we've worked so hard to build over the years and make me reevaluate my beliefs about forgiveness, family, and trust. Every week, Jane would call home to share her accomplishments and success stories. Every time Jane related her most recent victory at Riverside, I would sit at the kitchen table and see Mom's eyes light up. Have you heard? Mom would tell everyone she loved them. The university's psychology publication published Jane's study report. Only a sophomore she is. Dad would add that she is still doing all this additional research and keeping her GPA at 4.0. Our daughter is that. After high school, I worked at the neighborhood restaurant for 2 years in order to save money for community college until I eventually enrolled at Millbrook Community College. My parents were able to grin. It's lovely, too. Please. It wasn't Riverside, but it was something. Yesterday, Jane was once more shown on local TV. One evening during dinner, Mom revealed that they had questioned her regarding her studies on the development of children. She had such a polished appearance. As I pushed my portion about my plate, I said, "That's great. I put a lot of effort into my academics." Yes, I did. However, Jane's published papers and televised appearances strangely outshone her B-plus business introduction. After graduation, my accomplishments were like candlelight next to her brightness. Jane was already making a name for herself as a rising star in the psychology department at Preston Medical Center when reality struck hard. I was delivering resumes to nearby companies without receiving a callback. I became an assistant administrator at the Ansara shop as a result. She adopted that pitying expression for me. I had been accustomed to seeing, "It's only a temporary situation. Show me around until you find something more appropriate for someone with a degree," Sarah remarked. Then came the news that made all the difference. One Sunday night, Jane called, her voice full of enthusiasm. "I met someone, Mom and Dad." Over the speakerphone, she let out a squeak. "He works as a lawyer at Blackwell and Associates and goes by Michael. Half of the downtown buildings are owned by his family." I observed my parents' familiar glances of approbation as they interacted. Jane would undoubtedly find someone with her level of accomplishment. "Next month, he is taking me to Paris," Jane went on. "There, his family owns an apartment. Is it not unbelievable?" "That's fantastic, my love," Dad grinned proudly as Mom yelled. "I was still living in my childhood bedroom, earning minimum salary at my aunt's business, and I was sitting there in my old sweatpants." The disparity could hardly have been more pronounced. I was the underachieving sister who couldn't seem to start her life, and Jane was the accomplished psychologist who was seeing a wealthy lawyer. "When will we be able to see him?" Mom inquired excitedly. "This weekend, he's taking me to that new French restaurant. However, we might be able to join you for dinner next week." Before they could notice the tears in my eyes, I excused myself from the kitchen. I wasn't unhappy for Jane exactly. Yes, I was. But in some way, every one of her accomplishments seemed to draw attention to my shortcomings. In contrast, I felt like I was regressing by 2 steps for every step she made ahead. The holidays turned into a stage for Jane's colorful existence. Like a movie star, she would swoop into our parents' home with tales of significant customers, groundbreaking treatment sessions, and glitzy dates with Michael. During Thanksgiving dinner, she would explain, as I handed the mashed potatoes in silence, the CEO himself praised me in front of the entire board. "Inform them about the Boston convention, sweetheart." Mom would ask with a proud smile. "In this economy, minimum salary does not afford you your own flat." So I would sit there in my store-bought work clothes, still living in my childhood bedroom. I was unable to save enough money to move away, not even with my aunt's work discount. Then came the news that we all anticipated. During Christmas supper, Jane got up with Michael by her side, both of them beaming. "We're getting married." With a shriek, she held out her left hand to show off a gorgeous diamond-encrusted gold ring that glinted in every light. Michael said proudly, "It's been in my family for generations. In 1925, my great-grandmother received it from my great-grandfather." Mom started crying with happiness. As something heavy settled in my stomach, I faked a grin as Dad opened his finest bottle of wine. The months that followed were filled with hectic wedding planning. Jane was always at the house, transforming our small abode into a wedding preparation space. In the center, color samples, guest lists, and bridal publications appeared to be everywhere. I got a rare day-free one early spring Saturday. When I heard Jane and Mom in the yard below my window, I was lying on my bed with my battered copy of Pride and Prejudice. "The reception will look stunning with these flowers." Jane suggested that we add more plants to this barrier. "Take good care of your ring, my love. Those thorns can catch on anything," Mom warned. "You're correct," Jane said. "It continues latching onto this glove. For now, I'll just leave it on the bench here." Half listening to their conversation about table settings and flower arrangements, I went back to my book. I had just reached my favorite section when I heard my mother's voice. and the afternoon light was shining warmly through my window. If we are going to plant so many fresh roses, we need acquire extra fertilizer. Run to the garden center, please. Jane agreed. Good idea, Chris. The shop is where we're heading, returned shortly. I was too preoccupied with my book to truly listen, so I muttered an acknowledgement. The only sound in the home was the distant chatter of birds in the garden. Jane's terrified voice broke the silence as they got back. Mama, Mama, the ring! It's gone! I glanced up from my book to see the chaos outside my window. I could see Mom and Jane scrambling about the wooden bench, shoving flower pots and gardening tools away. This is where it was. Anxiety was rising in Jane's voice. I placed it on the bench just here. We'll locate it, honey, so don't worry. Although Mom reassured her, I could tell she was worried. Somewhere here it must be. Until the sun began to set, they sought, sifting through the entire garden. But there was no sign of the ring. I first noticed it in their eyes at that point, when my window caught their attention. Shaking hands were that glimmer of suspicion that would soon turn into something far more sinister. Jane picked up Michael's phone. From the other side of the room, I could hear his voice on the phone, getting louder by the second. You lost it? What do you mean? He spoke loudly over the speaker. My family has owned that ring for 4 generations. During 2 world wars, my great-grandmother wore that ring. Jane wept. I'm so sorry. We'll locate it, I swear. You had best locate it. I recoiled at the ferocity in his voice. Whatever it takes, I don't care. That ring cannot be replaced. Jane turned to face me after hanging up. Her face contorted in a way I had never seen her do before. Did you not take it? What? It seemed as if someone had hit me. Jane. I spent the entire time in my room. That's right. The only one here was you. Now she was yelling. Her cheeks are dripping with mascara. I've always made you jealous. Mom took a step forward, her expression grim. Christina, you must return the ring immediately if you took it. Nothing was taken by me. My voice broke. I promise. So it won't bother you if we search a room? I'm already on my way to the stairs, Dad responded. I watched helplessly as they tore apart my bedroom as I followed them up there. They overturned my mattress, emptied my jewelry box, rummaged through my drawers, and strewn my purse book all over the floor. My private journal was read page by page, and clothes were scattered all over the place. Somewhere here it must be. Jane swore and threw my garments on the ground. Searching for hours stretched into days and ultimately a week. The charges got harsher every day. Admit it. One morning, Jane cornered me in the kitchen. You took it out of jealousy, as we all know. I'm getting married and you can't even find a date and you can't stand it. Please look at you, Jane. She spat. Living with your parents at the age of 27, you labor at a menial job that Sarah offered you out of sympathy. Christina, you're a failure, and seeing me pleased was too much for you to bear. In the doorway was Mom, crossed arms. If you do not return it, we will notify the police. Proceed. I responded with a yell, breaking at last. Give them a call. Since I didn't steal your priceless ring, I have nothing to conceal. Every word cut more deeply than the one before it. The charges and threats weren't the worst part. It was the expression on their faces, the utter conviction that I was at fault, that I could be spiteful and jealous enough to betray my own sister. In a small town, news travels quickly. In a matter of days, the grocery store in Millbrook was filled with my parents' version of events. At church, my former neighbors avoided looking at me. Suddenly, people who had known me since I was a child decided to sit in different pews. I heard her voice behind me as I was replenishing shelves at my aunt's store. I froze when I heard Christina and Sarah's tone. We must speak. She didn't even give me a seat in her tiny office. I got a call from your mom this morning. Please, Aunt Sarah. She extended her hand. When no one else would take a chance on you, I did. And you pay me back like this? By taking your sister's ring of engagement? I didn't turn in your keys or clean out your locker. She spoke in a cold tone. A thief won't be employed at my store. It felt like a death march on the way home. Perhaps my parents would finally realize how much this was ruining my life. Perhaps they would see that I would never do this. Sarah fired me after I discovered them in the kitchen. My mom didn't even look up from her coffee when I said, "My boy, gather your belongings." What? You heard your mother. Dad said, "We want you out by tomorrow morning." The room started spinning. You're kicking me out? What am I meant to do? Maybe you should have thought about that before you stole from your sister. Mom finally looked at me, her eyes harder than I'd ever seen them. You brought shame to this family, Christina. I can't even look at my friends in the face anymore. I'm your daughter, I whispered. No daughter of mine would do what you've done. Her words sliced like glass. You have until dawn. I went upstairs in a haze, collecting my old workout bag from the closet. How can you pack up a life in one bag? Which bits of yourself do you choose to take? Clothes went in first? Enough for a week, maybe two. One pair of practical shoes. My laptop covered in a sweatshirt. Then came the difficult choices. The books that had been my pals when I had none. Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre. Little Woman. Stories of other women who struggled to find their place in a difficult environment. Through it everything. My tears would not cease. My first words had been heard by these walls, observing my initial moves. During all of my life's storms, this room had been my haven. It was just another location where I didn't belong. Old pals' texts chimed on my phone. It's unbelievable that you would do this. How could you too? Also, don't get in touch with me again. I came to the realization that Millbrook had nothing left for me as I sat on my striped bed surrounded by the remains of my existence. Every door closed, every bridge torched. It wouldn't be here, whatever I was going to become. I had to go. This town, not just this home. These recollections. This existence that had devolved into a prison of suspicion and charges. I had to think there was somewhere out there where I could start afresh, where I was the sister who stole the ring, but no one recognized me. The family's betrayed daughter. The girl who didn't measure up. I was looking at my phone's shrinking contact list at 3 a.m. I recalled that Rachel and I had previously been close in college. We were drawn in separate directions by life. I dialed her number with trembling fingers. I hope she continues to utilize it, Chris, she said in a sleepy voice. What's the matter? Between sobbing, the entire narrative came out of me. There was a lengthy silence when I was done. At last, she continued, I have a spare room. I'm now in Portland. Not much, but if you want it, it's yours. I looked at $342.17 in my bank account. Just enough for a dinner or two, and maybe a one-way bus ticket to Oregon. When are you able to visit? Rachel inquired. Tomorrow, I muttered. Tomorrow is my departure date. It took 2 days to travel by bus. The most of it was spent gazing out the window as I saw the familiar scenery of my life go into the unfamiliar. Sitting in my lap like a life preserver was my workout bag. Everything I had now, all in one tiny room. As promised, Rachel was waiting at the station. Without hesitation, she gave me a hug, and I felt like a human again for the first time in weeks. As we drove to her apartment, she stated, "The store where I work is hiring." I started it the following day, but it's just retail. After glancing at my business degree and my frantic gaze, the shop manager gave me a name tag. Register 3 is where you begin. As if it were a lifeline, I poured myself into the task. When other workers grumbled about lengthy hours, Millbrook and the damage I had left behind were only a minute away from every shift, sale and minute. I offered to remain longer when they complained about challenging clients. I smiled as I took them on. After 3 months, I was promoted to floor supervisor. Assistant manager 2 months later. I was in charge of my own department by the 8th month. You're not like most of the folks we promote. In my review, my district manager said, "You're hungry." He was correct. In addition to achievement, I was desperate for validation and evidence that I was more than my family believed me to be. I felt liberated on the day I signed the lease for my own flat. Even though it was only a little flat with a kitchenette, it was mine. I couldn't be told to go. Nobody was able to look through my belongings. My right to be there could not be questioned. That following day, I changed my phone number, deleted any digital traces that would go back to Millbrook, including social media accounts. Rachel didn't dispute, but she felt I was being overly dramatic. Once, she remarked cautiously, "They're still your family." "No," I said as I started unloading boxes at my new residence. "Your family has faith in you. Family is there for you. The day they decided not to trust me, they were no longer my family." In my new existence, in my new bed, at night, I occasionally pondered on them. Was Dane now married? Was Mom gardening anymore? Did Dad still sit at the kitchen table and read the paper every morning? But it was risky to wonder. Doubt followed wonder, and questioning led to that gloomy place when I doubted everything, myself included. I thus concentrated on my work, creating something new, and developing into a person who couldn't be written off or thrown away. Someone who didn't require the belief or approval of others. Someone who could endure being removed from the history of her own family, despite my best attempts to proceed. On certain evenings, my curiosity overcame me. I would urge Rachel to use her phone to monitor Jane's social media sites on such evenings. While looking through pictures one evening, Rachel informed me that she had gotten married. Church wedding, big white dress. In the photos, your parents appear content. I nodded, feigning indifference to the facts. She becomes pregnant a year later. According to Rachel, she showed me a picture of Jane holding her tummy. Michael put his hand over hers in a protective manner. She had a glowing appearance. This way, for years past. After years of seeing my family's life go on without me, I am now establishing a new life in Portland while occasionally catching a peek of my previous one through Rachel's phone screen. By use of well-chosen images and postings that never alluded to the missing sibling or daughter, then came the call that made all the difference. Chris. Rachel sounded out of breath. This is something you must see. She emailed my sister Christina a screenshot of Jane's most recent post. I apologize for my error. Please help me locate her if you know where she is. I must put this right. Please spread the word about this post. Please help me locate my sister. I gazed at the text till it became hazy. It's most likely a trick of some sort. Finally, I said, I don't believe so, Rachel said quietly. Take a look at the remarks. Your folks are also present, urging you to get in touch with them. As I read their remarks, my hands began to shake. Come home, Mom, please, my love. Dad, we need to talk to you. We made a grave error. Give us a chance, please. Their remarks felt unreal after 4 years of stillness, but there was a genuineness to their despair. I assumed the old residents would be disconnected when I dialed number half. On the first ring, Mom answered. Hi there. She still spoke in the same tone. It's me. Silently, I said. Then the sudden gasp for air. Christina. God, please. Christina. I heard her sobbing and phoning her father. Their voices collided with one another. Come home, please. We must see you. Something is important for you to know. Next weekend, I'm able to attend. The trip back to Millbrook was the longest I had ever taken, I heard myself remark. Every mile marker evoked memories I had worked so hard to forget. It was as though the town had been frozen in time, while my absence. When I got there, Jane's car was in the driveway. As I made my way up the well-worn path to the front door, my heart pounded against my ribs. The living room was where they were all waiting. For years, Mom, Dad, and Jane had also transformed them. Mom had grayer hair. Somehow, Dad let me get smaller. Jane, too. Jane had a 4-year-old infant on her lap, asleep. We located it. Mom's voice broke the ring as she spoke. We located it. Dad moved forward. Last week, it got entangled in the roots of the roses we were transplanting. Where exactly? Where exactly? That day, I took it off the bench, Jane concluded. She was crying uncontrollably. After the ring dropped, we planted it and covered it with dirt. It has always been there. The flowers are growing deeper. We were all broken by the discovery. Abrupt, unrestrained crying erupted across the living room. Mom's entire body trembled as she fell into Dad's arms. At last, Dad's silent calm broke down as tears fell down his grizzled face. Jane fell to her knees, awakening me and her sleeping kid with her sobs. The ability to survive after 4 years of keeping everything within. At last, I relaxed. Waves of tears fell. Years of suffering and isolation are leaking out in heartbreaking tears. Chris, I'm very sorry. Jane gasped in between breaths and choked. I treated you horribly, cruel, inexcusable. I let Michael's rage and my own anxiety to influence my decisions. I made the decision to think the worst of my own sister. Mom hesitated, unsure, before reaching for my hand. Through her sobs, she murmured, As parents, we failed you. We ought to have supported and believed in you, rather than us. She was unable to finish. Jane begged, please, tell us how this can be fixed. I'll do anything. All of us will. I turned to face these individuals who had been my entire world and then my darkest horror. And now? I had no idea what they were now. I can't act as though nothing happened during the past 4 years, I responded, wiping my eyes at last. I wasn't merely accused by you. I was condemned by you, made the entire town turn against me, left me without a place to go and just a gym bag. What if Mom paused, then went on? Imagine if we spotted someone, a family counselor, someone who could assist us in repairing the damage we caused. Every month. With a brief addition, Dad's voice remained full of emotion. For as long it takes. I glanced at the little lad sitting on the sofa. My nephew. I was startled to realize. He had Michael's black hair and Jane's nose. He had gone through years of life without an aunt. I will not return to Millbrook, the first spoke aggressively. My life is currently in Portland. Well done. Friends who supported me while others refused to. We get it, Jane remarked. You are not worthy of returning to our life, but only if you're prepared to give it a go. 3 months passed before I finally consented to my first vacation. Thanksgiving. In order to get support, I invited Rachel along. Although the dinner was uncomfortable and filled with tactful banter and side topics, it was a beginning. Our family therapist, Dr. Martinez, guides us through the more difficult discussions. We discuss trust, treachery, the poison of assumptions, and the weight of expectations in her office. We occasionally leave her sessions feeling wounded or furious. Slowly, cautiously, old wounds resurfaced. We're getting better at listening to one another. Jameson. The simplest part is my nephew Tommy. 4-year-olds have no resentment or familial memory. For him, I'm just Aunt Chris, who teaches him to sketch and delivers him books from Portland. His naive love serves as a link between our past selves and our potential selves. The roses that bloomed around the ring for 4 years are still in bloom in Mom's yard. Sometimes when I look at them, I consider how layers of presumptions and accusations might bury reality like a ring in the ground. However, truth rises to the top like those blooms. Finally, I've changed since leaving Millbrook with a broken heart and a workout bag. The individuals that threw me out are not the same ones. We're all discovering that, similar to gardening, mending requires patience, time, and ongoing attention. We keep trying, even if some days are more difficult than others.